In this week's parasha, the Torah speaks about certain animals that are inappropriate to bring to the temple as sacrifices. They are themselves kosher animals and unblemished, but there's something wrong with them in that they cannot be brought to the temple. These are called etnan zonah u'mechir kelef. The first one is where a person takes on the services of a prostitute, a harlot, and instead of giving her money, he gives her an animal. The second is mechir kelef, where a person has a dog to sell, and instead of selling the dog for money, he takes an animal in its place. And the Torah says in both instances, you cannot bring that animal into the temple for a sacrifice. It's not considered to be appropriate. Let's focus on the first one, where a person hires a prostitute and pays her with this animal, with this. Perhaps it's a calf, or it's a sheep, or it's a goat. And the Torah says it may not be brought. It's completely inappropriate. Now, why is that so? This brings us to a concept which the Talmud calls mitzvah haba'a be'avera. A mitzvah, a good deed, the fulfillment of one of the commandments of Hashem, but it comes about through an avera, through the fulfillment of a negative commandment, through a sin. This is discussed in the Talmud when it speaks about the 4 species on Sukkot. We've got the willow, the myrtle, the palm branch, the etrog, and there are many, many rules about what makes them kosher. They have to be a particular size, they have to be fairly fresh, they can't be moldy, etc. And the Talmud goes into all of the different details of how to identify one of the 4 species and under what circumstances it can be used for the mitzvah of lulav and etrog. And the one thing that the Talmud tells us is etrog hagazul posel, that a stolen etrog is invalid. You can't use it. Well, why can't you use it? So the Talmud says, on day 1, we can understand why you can't use a stolen etrog, because the Torah says, v'lakachta lachem. You have to take for yourselves on the first day of Sukkot. You have to own it. And if it's stolen, you don't own it. But what about the rest of the days on Sukkot? The rest of the days of Sukkot, the Torah doesn't require that you have to own the 4 species. You could even borrow them. So why is a stolen etrog not valid? And here the Talmud tells us, because it's a mitzvah haba ba'avera. It's a mitzvah, it's the performance of a good deed, of a commandment, but it came through a sin. That's the sin of theft. And what a chutzpah it is, says the Talmud, and it quotes a verse from Proverbs, where a person steals something and then blesses Hashem. He steals a piece of bread and then he blesses Hashem. That's not a blessing. That's a provocation. That's a curse. How can you do such a thing? To actually do a negative commandment and then to use the proceeds of that to fulfill a positive commandment? Can there be a greater chutzpah than that? And that's the problem with the etnan zonah. This is something that people who work in the Jewish community have to be very, very careful with. We're always strapped for cash. Jewish organizations always have to fundraise. We have to go here, we have to go there, we have to go see this donor, and we have to go see that donor. And after a while, people get a little bit desperate. I have a friend, a colleague, who was involved in a particular group that was looking after Russian immigrants to the United States. And these immigrants came, they weren't religious, they didn't know anything about Judaism. Many of them never had a Brit Milah, circumcision. Certainly they never had a bar mitzvah, and they never had a pair of tefillin. Tefillin are very, very expensive. So there was this drive to raise a whole lot of money to buy hundreds, if not thousands, of pairs of tefillin. And this colleague of mine went off to see a particular donor, and the donor said, 100%, I'll sponsor X amount of tefillin. It was quite a considerable amount of money in dollars. He was all excited, he was all charged up, and he went to speak to his Rosh Hashiva, and he told his Rosh Hashiva that this man had pledged the money for the tefillin, and the Rosh Hashiva shook his head, and he said, no, you can't take the money from that man. His money is not honestly made, it's dirty money, turn it down. And very often we overlook where the money comes from, that it comes from sources that are not exactly honest, not exactly kosher. And Hashem says, you know what, I don't want that in my temple. I don't want you to serve me with such money. It's invalid. Well, there was a story I heard once in Johannesburg where it was just before Sukkot, and there was this Gentile woman. In fact, she wrote a letter to the local newspaper, a Gentile woman, and she knew that every year before Sukkot, people would come knocking on her doors because she had lovely palm trees, and they would ask, can we cut down some of the leaves and use it for a sukkah? And she said, absolutely, you can do it. Go do it with pleasure. But one year, somebody just pulled up in a bakkie reversed it right against the wall, I believe even damaged the wall, stood on the back of the bakkie and cut the palm branches to take to their sukkah without asking whatsoever. And she was very distressed. She would have given it to them gladly. But why did they have to do that? I can tell you that that person didn't fulfill their mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah. How can you sit under the sukkah with palm branches that were stolen from somebody's tree? That's a mitzvah haba ba'avera. So yes, we must do good deeds, but that doesn't allow us to justify sins in order to do those good deeds. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.